Hey there, so if you're watching this video, you are here to improve your math score on the SAT. I'm going to give you a lot of tips that no one told me. I ended up making a perfect score on the math portion of my SAT, and I have always been good at math, but I'm not like a math genius. I wasn't in advanced math at school or anything. So the biggest thing I want you to know is you can do it. You can get a great score on that SAT. You don't need to be a genius engineer going into MIT. It's doable, and I'm going to show you how. So first tip is familiarize yourself with the formulas that the College Board gives you during the exam. On the first page of every section, the math and the no calculator section, you will get a sheet of formulas, and it'll be like the volume of a sphere and all that kind of stuff. There are certain formulas you just need to memorize. It will save you so much time from going back and flipping and finding it. That is a time sucker, and for the math section, you really need to be moving on time. So the formulas that you should memorize are things like volume of a sphere, just different volumes and stuff, but don't freak out, don't worry, and put all of your effort in memorizing that kind of stuff. It's there if you need it, it would help you, definitely, if you do memorize some of them. So you need to know the general locations. Just be familiar with the locations of each formula on the sheet. Again, no crazy memorization, just familiarize yourself with them, internalize them. And so to do that, it's just really simple. It's not a big deal to memorize these guys, but I did print out the College Board sheet and hang it on my mirror, so every day I just kind of glanced at it in the mirror every morning, every night, and I kind of knew the general location of a lot of these formulas, so if I did need to go back and look at them, I wouldn't read the entire sheet searching for them. I could just immediately find it and get back to the problem. But there are some formulas that the College Board does not provide you with, which are super helpful. They're almost like shortcut formulas, and I do recommend that you memorize them. I will provide a link to them below. There's too many for me to count off now, but Prep Scholar does an amazing article just detailing this long list of formulas that you might want to memorize. Don't memorize all of them, but just familiarize yourself with them, and just pick a couple that you think would be most beneficial to you to learn. I hand wrote the list just to really internalize it, the formulas that I was interested in, just adding to my arsenal to attack these problems and solve them. And I put that on my mirror next to the actual formula sheet. Again, just every day look at them, expose yourself to them, and you never know if that could just save you on a problem in the test. My next tip is practice makes perfect. Use Khan Academy. The biggest thing I can tell you right now is you don't need a fancy tutor. I watched every single video that Khan Academy put out for the math portion of the SAT. That's a ton, and I do think that it helped really give me a solid foundation. And so then when I started doing practice problems, I had seen a lot of them before, and I wasn't just trying to kind of fumble my way through. Because a huge part of the test is that there are a lot of ways to solve problems, but some ways are a lot more efficient than others, and some of them are very time consuming. And that is the big trick of the SAT, is a lot of these problems you could solve if you had an extra hour to solve them, but you don't. You have a time frame, a time constraint. So you need to learn the methods that are the fastest to get in the problem, find the right answer, and get out and move on to the next question. And the videos are so helpful, but you can't just watch videos. You have to do a lot of practice, because that's where you really learn and your brain really connects like what you've watched with the problem and how to do it. And that is where the magic happens. I'm the biggest fan of Khan Academy, especially for math, and they have this amazing feature that every one of you needs to use, where it can identify your weaknesses, and this is for writing and reading and writing too. So you can see, okay, I'm strongest on this, and it gives you a star rating, like out of 5 stars, you're a 5-star. I think it's out of 3 stars. 3 out of 3, you don't need to focus on it. Don't waste your time on that. And then they have like 2 stars, you're okay, 1 star, it needs help. So maybe geometry is a problem area for you. It will let you know that, and it will give you individualized practice problems for you to do and things for you to read, so that you can make geometry one of your greatest strengths instead of a weakness. So that way you can study that weakness extra hard and you can master it. and they give you such a wide variety of problems that when you do practice tests or even the real SAT, you'll recognize that type of problem. It'll just be different numbers, but it'll be the same approach. And like I said before, timing is a huge part of the test. So the practice will really help you get your timing down and just really move through the test quickly and efficiently while also being precise. A little disclaimer, this may sound like overkill, but to really make sure I did well in the math section, I kept a notebook where I wrote down every problem that I missed on a practice test. And I wrote down why my answer was wrong and why the correct answer was right. And Khan Academy's explanations are so lengthy and in-depth, and they just really make sure you conceptually understand it, not just kind of superficial understanding for the test. You will understand it. That way, if it shows up in a different form on the test, you still know how to tackle it. Another tip is to ask your math teacher for help. There's nothing wrong with that. My math teacher, both pre-calculus and geometry, he would point out specifically when one concept we were learning might be asked on the SAT. And when your teacher points something out like that, you need to pay attention. You really need to pay attention. And maybe go to them after class and say, hey, can I have a couple of extra practice problems? Or hey, I need help with this concept. I really want to make sure I understand it because I'm about to take the SAT. Will you help me? And they will. I never went to my teacher specifically for SAT prep because you might have to use them, I guess, more as a tutor like that, but I definitely think that they would be happy to help you. So I kind of touched on this earlier, but you do not need a tutor to do well on the test. Khan Academy is such an amazing resource for just studying and practicing and learning. You don't even need a tutor, really. I took one SAT prep course this summer for my junior year, and it did not help very much. I did learn a couple of tips and tricks, but I can link Prep Scholar articles below. They have so many that are so useful, and they just give you the highlights. And if you read the highlights of Prep Scholar articles telling you just like the best tips, and then if you watch Khan Academy videos and read their explanations for just why you got a problem wrong, and you just do a ton of practice, that is all you need. You do not need to spend money on a tutor. So don't feel like if you can't afford a tutor, or if maybe there aren't any good ones in your area, don't feel like that's putting you at a disadvantage, because they're not nearly as valuable as I think people believe that they are. And my last tip to you is don't get discouraged. If you have been prepping really hard and you take a practice test and maybe you score a little bit lower than your last practice tests, that is so normal. All the tests are so different, and you know, it's all about forging forward, and if you keep practicing, you will do better in the long term. I guarantee it. And the biggest thing with the SAT is not to give up. This is a test that you can learn and master. It's not a test that is just, you know, you either have it or you don't. If you study, especially the math section, I've always heard that the math section is the easiest to improve. Reading's a little harder because if you grow up reading a lot, you're at an advantage. And if you didn't read much as a kid, that might hurt you a little. But with the math section, anyone can master it. They're not super duper hard concepts because they can only go up to like a certain high school level. And you can learn that, believe me. Especially if you aren't in advanced math right now. Maybe you're an underclassman, and if you're not finished with geometry or algebra 2, or even if you're still taking pre-calculus, you really need to go through the end of pre-calculus to have all the concepts that you really need for the test. So don't go too hard on yourself if you haven't finished a year of learning. Maybe you're a sophomore, you'll get there. Your teacher will teach you these concepts, and if you just practice on the outside and do a lot of prep and preparing, you will do great. If you practice, you will do better in the long run. So I hope this video helped you guys out. If you have any questions, leave them below. A lot of my tips are more like test-taking strategies, studying strategies, but I will link the Prep Scholar articles below because they give you like more mathematical tips that will just revolutionize the way that you solve problems. And then practice on Khan Academy and you'll do great. So I wish you all luck, and I will see you next video. Bye.